In today's episode, I'll review when Shanna transitioned from moderate stage Alzheimer's to advanced stage or severe Alzheimer's. And I'm going to do this in a couple of different parts, so this will be part one. And we'll cover the time period of her last year or so at home with me when I was taking care of her 24/7. I'll briefly review what are some of the common symptoms that happen during this late stage of Alzheimer's and what we've experienced so far. I'll also share a few of the more difficult caregiving experiences that I went through, and basically I'll talk about what helped me to get through that very difficult period of caregiving. Welcome to the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast. I'm your host, Ken Cardita. In this podcast, I share with you my experiences and learnings from the last 13 years as I've walked by the side of my dear wife, Shanna, as she progresses through Alzheimer's disease. It is my desire that you'll find joy and peace while learning to live with your loved one's disease, and not let the disease define you or your loved one. The Surviving Alzheimer's podcast is brought to you by Ascending Minds, LLC. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to share a comment from a listener that left a review on the Apple Podcast platform. They said, "I cannot be more thankful for you and this podcast. Thank you for helping us all understand. I look forward to hearing how the journey went and is going." Well, thank you. I appreciate that. First thing I want to state, in preparing for this episode, I reviewed some of my journals, the one that I started in 2019 and also the one that I kept in 2020. And I read through them a little bit, and I found it very difficult to pinpoint where Shanna transitioned from moderate to advanced Alzheimer's. Now, in 2019, she started to see hallucinations, experience severe mood swings, but she was generally physically capable. We still actually went on very long walks together, going for a couple of miles each morning. She was still able to communicate with me, but was beginning to show signs of difficulty. Even in early 2020, we still were able to travel and went out of state a few times. These led to some very anxious experiences that were peppered with different occurrences of her behavioral mood swings. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. So as I looked through all this, my best estimation was sometime in late 2019 and early 2020, she started to transition from moderate to advanced Alzheimer's. And for sure, by late 2020, we had been there for many months. So what do you typically see when a person transitions from moderate to severe Alzheimer's? Well, I went to the Alzheimer's organization website, and these are the things that they had to say about late stage, advanced, severe, whatever you want to call it, the final stages of Alzheimer's. Here's what they had to say. In the final stage of the disease, dementia symptoms are severe. Individuals lose the ability to respond to their environment, to carry on a conversation, and eventually to control movement. They may still say a few words or phrases, but communicating pain becomes difficult. As memory and cognitive skills continue to worsen, significant personality changes may take place in individuals, and they may need more intensive care. Well, for sure, this is what we saw. Her ability to carry on a conversation was beginning to decline, and as time has gone on, especially the last couple of years, she's become basically nonverbal. But in the early stages of this phase, she was able to say many things, not often in a complete sentence, though. Now, at this stage, individuals may see some of the following behaviors. They may require around-the-clock assistance with daily personal care. And yes, indeed, I did not feel comfortable leaving Shanna at home by herself during this period. I always made sure someone was around to watch over her, and just do things for her if she needed help. I did not feel safe with her being by herself. Sometimes they will also lose awareness of recent experiences as well as their surroundings. I definitely saw this. She was forgetting something that was done just a few minutes earlier. And also, her surroundings started to become less familiar. And over time, as this continued, she even had difficulty finding the bathroom in our house and would often walk by it. They will also experience changes in physical abilities, including walking, sitting, and eventually swallowing. I did not see this until much later in this stage. In fact, years later, Shanna was able to walk with me for 2 to 3 miles in 2019. But that reduced, and by 2020, it went down to about a mile. And then by the end of 2020, she could just about walk a quarter of a mile without getting tired. And now, years later, she could only walk maybe an eighth of a mile without getting exhausted. But as the weather cools here in Arizona, my mission is this winter to build up her stamina and get her to be able to take a substantial walk over time. We'll see how that goes. Early on, she had no problem sitting. I'm starting to see that now, and she's not having any problem swallowing just yet. Next thing that they mention is having difficulty communicating, and for sure, I saw this. They become vulnerable to infections, especially pneumonia. Luckily, and by the grace of God, Shanna and myself have not caught COVID or any serious sicknesses. In fact, Shanna has remained relatively healthy throughout the last few years of her Alzheimer's journey. Now, the person living with Alzheimer's may not be able to initiate engagement as much during this stage, but they can still benefit from interactions in ways that are appropriate. In other words, it's hard for them to initiate a conversation or to say, I want to do this or that. It's up to you, the caregiver, to try to engage them in activities that they once loved. Now, some examples of these things that have worked for us is listening to music that's familiar and relaxing. And for my wife, I could put on some music that she liked to dance to, and she'll get up and dance. And she even does that in the memory care center. And so music has this wonderful effect on people with dementia. And the reason for that is that the part of the brain that processes music is one of the last ones to be attacked by the disease. So they're able to recognize music, and it has an amazing effect. I'll share a quick story. There is an older woman in the memory care center with my wife, who for the most part is pretty docile and quiet. She can still say a phrase here and there, and I have a fun time trying to make her smile when I visit. But when the music therapist comes and plays the piano, she'll get up and she'll start dancing. And it's amazing to see the transformation that the music has in her. I also see this in my wife and many of the other residents. So if you're not taking advantage of playing music for your loved one, I highly recommend it. Also, reassurances through gentle touch is also something that could help calm and comfort your loved one. I have seen this in the memory care facility. The caregivers often use gentle touch on the arm with a reassuring smile and positive words of encouragement to many of the residents. And of course, I do this with my wife. I give her hugs every time I see her. I hold her hand, and I can feel it just keeps her calm and helps to make her happy. Now, during this stage, this final stage, caregivers may want to use support services, such as in-home care or hospice care. And hospice care can provide comfort and dignity, especially at the end of life. I haven't gone through this yet, but I also know that hospice has what's called palliative care, which is not end-of-life care. And I've seen hospice come into the memory care facilities and add additional support services like bathing and feeding and just spending time with a loved one. I haven't engaged in this just yet, but I will when the need comes. I was late to the game was getting in-home care. And I highly recommend when you start to feel being burned out as a caregiver to get some help. Even if it's just a few hours, 1 or 2 days a week, it will just give you a little bit of a chance to relax and get some respite care. Well, how did I make it through this most difficult time? Probably one of the biggest things that I did was I started to keep a journal. There's power in journaling. The act of writing things out allows you to physically release emotions and feelings that, if not let out, will be stored up in your body and can actually cause you pain and discomfort. So by writing about what I was experiencing, it allowed me to express it and review it later on. And I think that was where the big benefit was, is I would go back and reread stuff from weeks or months ago and even years ago as time went on and have a better perspective. So I started the journal in April of 2019. And interestingly enough, as I was reviewing the journal, a few months later, in late October of 2019, this is what I wrote. I said, "Time for a change." When I first started this journal, it was mainly to record Shanna's changes and my adjustments to act as a way to track Shanna's decline. In reality, it has been much more. It has been a tool to help me become a better caregiver and a better person in general. Moving forward, I will still capture new behaviors with Shanna, but I will also focus more on my growth and capture my reflections as we go down this path together. Also, I want to capture the positive moments of joy that occur, and that is what I want to recall in the years ahead. And I'm so glad I did that. It's so easy for us to focus on all the hard and negative things. But sprinkled in between, there were many tender mercies from God and many joyful moments together. And it is great to relive those joyful moments. I believe this was a key factor in enabling both of us to survive Alzheimer's so far. There is great power when we can have a remembrance of joyful memories, even though we're in the middle of our most challenging times. It could provide hope to us when we're just starting to descend into despair. A quick sample of some of the early lessons that I jotted down in the beginning of the journal made me realize that I needed to kind of change my caregiving methods. Here's a couple of one-liners. Lesson: let her do what she wants to do, and let the chips fall as they may. Lesson: stop trying to control her and the situation just to make things easy for me to take care of her. I learned to allow her to enjoy what little independence that she still had remaining. And that was a big lesson learned. As I tried to hover and control and help her, again, with mostly my intention to make it easy on me, I was stripping away and taking her from the little things that she could still do for herself. So I learned to back off and allow her to ask me for help at times. Another lesson learned, I was coming to the conclusion that I needed to stop making things worse. I had a habit of making things worse, and I needed to start to change how I was acting when I would often trigger her and upset her. These are some of the things that I wrote down. Stop trying to use logic and go over things over and over and over until she finally understands I need to try a new process. Here's what I need to try. 1. Just sincerely apologize and own what I have done. 2. Give herself some time to process the emotion. This was because I'm wired that I want to fix things right away. Once I've messed up, I want to apologize and move on. I've always felt very uncomfortable when she was upset with me, and this was something that we experienced throughout the entire part of our marriage. Now I finally had to learn to allow her to process it in the timing that she needed. Also, I had a bad habit of keep bringing it up, so I decided do not mention it anymore. If she brings it up, I will just apologize again, and I won't defend my actions. Regardless if I was in the right or if I was in the wrong, it really didn't matter. And the last thing I wrote was, wait it out. She will eventually forget why she's mad, and that she even is mad. And that is so true. And that is actually one of the silver lining blessings of this disease, is when our loved ones do get upset, they will eventually forget why. And there's no need for us to bring it up. Now, this next lesson came late in 2019, and at that time I had been assisting her for many months in helping her to get dressed, and also helping in the bathroom. It took me many months to figure out how to do this effectively. And along the way, I did frustrate her many, many times. Here's a journal entry from the early part of that long learning process. The key takeaway was, I am the one who is more capable to change and adapt. And I need to focus on my thoughts and actions about all of this. So this entry comes from late December, a couple weeks before Christmas in 2019. Here's what I wrote. This one's on me! ! This morning, Shanna got very mad when I helped her to go to the bathroom. I was treating her like a baby. So I eventually agreed, and I backed off. Now the day had gone on, and here's what I was writing at the end of the day. Just now, in helping her to put her pajamas on for the evening, she was struggling to get her bra unbuckled. Rather than jumping in and doing it for her, I waited a minute. And then she started to struggle with it and put it back on again when it was halfway off. I just simply reminded her that she was trying to take it off. But she got very angry and upset with me, just mentioning that. And then, unfortunately, I lost it. I said, I didn't do anything wrong to upset you. I'm just trying to help you. And then I write, in parentheses, when will I learn that I should not try to reason with her? She then refused to finish changing, and we were kind of at a standoff. At this point, I just should have walked away and come back later. But I kept pressing, and she got even more upset. And I finally lost it, and I responded with, "You are so ungrateful." This escalated her emotions. And she said, "You don't have to care for me." And then I responded with possibly the worst thing I could have said. I responded, "It's either me or you go to a nursing home." Big mistake. That really freaked her out and hurt her feelings. I finally realized what I had done and quickly apologized and backed off. I continued to write the journal entry. I did everything wrong tonight. There are lessons that I have learned and need to reset my brain. I can't have her refusing my help for things that I have been doing for her for months. Hopefully, I can keep my cool moving forward and maneuver through all of this frustrating behavior. I need to be more empathetic and not to have my feelings hurt. As I review this entry from a few years back, I can actually remember that night and how bad I felt and why really upset her. The comment about threatening to move her to a nursing home was inappropriate and really probably did more harm at that time. Luckily, we were able to work through it. But this was just a good example of me realizing I had done everything wrong and I needed to make some changes. I'm happy to say that eventually I got better at caregiving, and we were able to go on for about another year of me assisting her. But we would occasionally have difficult times, but I had learned my lesson to back off and allow her to move at her speed and at her pace. One other thing I'd like to talk a little bit about was dealing with what I call her altered reality and some of the hallucinations she was having. There were many occurrences of this, and these episodes would often last for a few days. I will talk about one experience briefly. We would be walking our dog, and she would get very sad and start crying. And I would try to understand what was going on. I said, "What are you crying about?" And she would just say, the dog, my dog. I go, "She's right here." "No, my dog." It took me probably a day or two to figure out that she said Lucky. Lucky was the dog that she owned when she was 5 years old. Over the course of a day or two of her crying on and off, I realized she wanted to know what happened to her dog, Lucky, and I had no clue. I knew that she had a dog named Lucky, but I didn't know what happened to it. So I tried my best when she would get upset to say, "Oh, Lucky's fine. She's in heaven, blah, blah, blah." And I could not console her. So after about 3 days of this, I felt inspired to call one of her older sisters. And we talked on the phone, the three of us, and I explained that Shanna was concerned about Lucky. And she, in the most awesome way, just described Shanna's relationship with Lucky and reminded Shanna of how she and the dog would sit in the corner of the room and the dog would comfort Shanna when she was upset or afraid. And that Lucky lived a wonderful life and she finally passed away and that Lucky was in a good place. And this really helped Shanna. I was amazed when her sister told the story to both of us, how it set Shanna at ease. And I thanked her for that. And of course, the next day and the next couple of days, Shanna would get upset about Lucky. But now I was armed with the truth, and I was able to comfort her and repeat what her sister had told me, and repeat to Shanna that her sister told us this, and she would quickly stop crying and be in a much better mood. It was interesting, as the next week went on, this happened less and less, and finally it just went away. And one of the lessons I learned on this is that Shanna's going to get upset about things that are from the past or may not even be real. But to her, it's her reality. The emotion is real to her. Her logic might not make sense to me, but it did to her. And this was a key learning. When we stop trying to pull our loved ones into our reality and are willing to go with them into their reality, that allows you to be more effective in calming them down, letting them know everything is okay, and help pulling them out of that panic or that anger or that sadness. As I was dealing with this, some of the notes that I put down are, Ken, this is what not to do. Try and use logic to talk some sense into her, or set her straight or correct her. That never helps. For me, do not get upset and raise my voice. For me, do not take it personal if she says something that is hurtful or she seems ungrateful. Do not offer drastic solutions to diffuse things. Rather, the things that I should try and do is validate her concerns and emotions. I need to stay calm. If it's easy to remedy the problem, just do it. If it's more difficult, try and get her to calm down a little bit. And then break the situation by moving on to trying to get her to do something else. And always, always reaffirm my love for her. Again, realize that her reality is her reality. Don't try and fix it. Don't try and adjust it. Just go with the flow and enter into it. And when you have an opportunity, you may be able to eventually divert her attention to a more calmer space by changing the conversation without trying to upset. So again, these were things that I wrote in my journal that have been helpful to me along the way, and I hope they're helpful to you. Now, a key factor in making this change and how I handled the ever-increasing daily challenges of caregiving during this part of our dementia journey was that I changed my perspective on how I viewed what was going on. Realizing that often it was the disease that was changing her and that she couldn't do anything to stop it. She was changing week after week in unpredictable ways, and she couldn't help herself. This eventually helped me not to take things that she said and did personally. And that was a key shift for me. Shanna has always had a favorite saying long, long ago. And that saying is, whatever you focus on expands. There's a little plaque that she bought, maybe 25 years ago, or even longer, that sits in our dining room on a table next to our kitchen table that says this. And I must have read this saying a million times. And during this time period, I really took it to heart. Because indeed, whatever we focus on in our mind becomes very, very apparent. And I'm sure you've seen this happen where maybe you're thinking you want to buy a new car and you figured out the make and model, and then all of a sudden you're driving around and all you can see is that same car, that same make and model. That's just the way our brain works. When we focus on something, we see what we focus on. Now, this saying of whatever you focus on expands is a great way to remind us how much our thoughts and our mindsets drive our emotions and our feelings. And this, in turn, affects how we act and react and directly influences how we interpret our experiences. Now, I will admit, as I was going through this time period, it was extremely difficult for me to stay upbeat and positive, especially while in the moment of dealing with a new dementia behavior, or one that I was all too familiar to see. At first, I would often jump right to despair, and then that would lead to depression, followed by me feeling so guilty over how I mishandled the situation. This became a habit, and I needed to try and break it. The learnings often occurred after Shanna went to bed for the night, and I would reflect on the day's events, what I did, what I didn't do, and I'd write them in my journal as I was unwinding from another busy day of caregiving. This was probably the key component that allowed me to survive the pandemic lockdown, to take that time to reflect. And I am so grateful for that. And I realized I was very fortunate to be able to recharge my batteries most evenings. Luckily, Shanna liked to go to bed at around 7 or 8, and she would often sleep through the night. And I used this time for me. I did things for me. I applied some self-care, but most importantly, I reflected on my actions and thoughts of that day and just tried to improve one little thing. Now, a big lesson that I had learned along this journey was it is near impossible to try and change everything all at once. And every time I would try and say, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm going to change X, Y, and Z, and this is what I'm going to do. Every time I would take that approach, it might last for a few days, and then I'd crash and burn. And then I would quickly fall back to my old behaviors. And once again, go through the cycle of beating myself up, replaying in my head all the negative self-talk that was keeping me in a state of despair with no hope. Finally, I started to, and I eventually learned to make mental changes that over time would accumulate and make a big difference. Once I broke the pattern of hating myself every time I didn't handle the situation just perfectly, and realized that, yeah, hey, you messed up again, but overall, you did a better job, and I focused on what little thing to improve next, I was able to avoid many trips to depression land. Now, I realize that many of you are either going through your most challenging time right now as a caregiver, or you may be just starting out and your most difficult times lie ahead of you. It was my intention today to just share a few things that helped me get through my most difficult and challenging times as the demands of being a caregiver were at their height. Now, as I sit on the other side of those experiences and I reflect back on those days, I realize that I never would have survived them without God's help. That help often came in feeling His love for me and for Shanna during my heartfelt pleadings for strength and understanding during many late nights on my knees praying, asking for help and understanding. God's help also came in the form of many others who were supportive to us in a variety of ways during this part of our journey, as well as all parts of our journey. I believe that God sends people here and they act as our own personal angels to help us out and answer our prayers. My final message to you today is you will get through this difficult time period. There will come a time when you'll be able to look back and assess what you've learned along the way. I hope that you'll be able to realize that you survived the hardest part of your journey. Whether or not you heal from this depends on you. How you choose to view your journey with your loved one will make all of the difference. Well, thank you for listening today. Once again, I would encourage you to leave a comment on this episode or any other episode. Leave a review on whatever podcast platform that you're using to listen to this on. I'll leave a link in the description of this episode to where you can go to the Facebook page for this podcast and leave a comment if you'd like. I really do appreciate hearing from you and would love to hear how this is helping you or a topic that you'd like me to cover in the future. Well, in our next episode, I will discuss how I came to the decision and then prepared for moving my wife Shanna to a memory care facility. As always, thank you for listening, and be sure to follow the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast so you can be notified of future episodes. Thanks for watching an episode of the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I recommend that you watch the first 13 episodes in order. That way you can learn about our backstory. This will make understanding later episodes much easier. To help you with this, I've created a playlist. It's called Surviving Alzheimer's Podcast in Order. That way you can listen to all the episodes in the order that they were created. The mission of the Surviving Alzheimer's podcast is to educate and inspire caregivers, family, and friends who are on their own unique journey down dementia road with their loved one. I would really appreciate it if you could share this episode to anyone who you feel would benefit from it. Additional ways for you to help us reach others are to hit the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to be notified of new episodes. All of these actions will encourage the YouTube algorithm to share this episode and podcast to other potential viewers.